In this special Terra Santa news, in the first place, the news of 2019 regarding the Holy Land and the Church. An occasion to remember our services and images published throughout the year. An unprecedented number of pilgrims and tourists from all over the world visited the Holy Land in 2019. The apostolic journey of Pope Francis to the United Arab Emirates. The 25th anniversary of the agreement between the Holy See and the State of Israel. Pray for Gaza, where everything is missing, is the plea of Monsignor Pizzaballa. The memories of Pope Benedict XVI's pilgrimage to the Holy Land 10 years ago. The 800 years since St. Francis's pilgrimage of peace to the Holy Land, from the Pentecost chapter to the overseas mission, from Assisi to Damietta, the encounter between St. Francis and the Sultan of Egypt, Al-Malik al-Kamil, an embrace of peace in the sign of dialogue between East and West, the 8th centenary celebrated throughout the world. These and other news commented by Monsignor Pierbattista Pizzaballa, Latin Archbishop of Jerusalem, and Brother Francesco Patton, Custos of the Holy Land. An unprecedented number of pilgrims and tourists from all over the world have visited the Holy Land this year. Israeli and Palestinian Ministry of Tourism numbers indicate a new record. I would like to point out that the pilgrimage is a fundamental part of the identity of this church. This church has always received pilgrims, so when pilgrims come here, they become an integral part of our church. What do they bring and what do they get? First of all, I hope that it will be a good experience of faith for them, because the pilgrimage is first and foremost in the footsteps of Jesus. It is a bond that the Universal Church makes with the Church of the Holy Land. They also bring concrete opportunities for work. A lot of work, especially for our Christians, which is a very beautiful and dignified way of sustaining the Christian presence. Let us say that it is a very important and very beautiful context. The apostolic journey of Pope Francis to the United Arab Emirates and the document on human brotherhood for world peace and common coexistence. The first journey of a pope to the Arabian Peninsula. It was first and foremost important that we also meet in a context of great division throughout the Middle East, where the religious element is so crucial. At least 130,000 Catholics living in the Emirates attended Mass at the Zayed Sports City Stadium in Abu Dhabi. It was very important that for the first time a Mass was celebrated publicly, with 130,000 Christians present in that region. We know that there are millions of Christian foreign workers in that region. This is also an important and not a given passage. Another important gesture was the joint declaration and the document on human brotherhood for world peace and common coexistence.
Il documento è coraggioso. Molti lo possono contestare, quello che si vuole, ma
The document is bold. Many can challenge it, certainly. Everything can be improved, but it is bold because it is the first time that a Christian Catholic authority such as the Pope and an Islamic authority make a common document. And they say something important and strong, first of all to the Muslim community in the Middle East. They are saying that Christians are not a minority, they are not foreigners, they are an integral part of the life of their country. This gesture is very important because it marks a perspective for the future in a context of accusations, of contrast.
Questo gesto insieme è molto importante perché segna una prospettiva per il futuro.
An encounter based on mutual respect, on the dialogue between faithful and, I would say, on the need to build relationships of friendship between different faiths. An important meeting not only for the Holy Land, but for the whole Arab world, and even more so for all humanity.
Non era presente come discorso della Terra Santa, ma
It was not only the Holy Land that was spoken about, but how we can live together as brothers everywhere, in the Holy Land, in Egypt, in Iraq, in Syria, in Yemen, how Muslims and Christians can live together as brothers.
e tutto come può vivere insieme musulmani, cristiani come fratelli.
It is still considered one of the achievements of the pontificate of John Paul II, the 25th anniversary of the agreement between the Holy See and the State of Israel. On March the 14th, during the meeting at the Apostolic Nunciature in Israel to celebrate the 6th anniversary of the pontificate of Pope Francis, Tsachi Hanegi, Minister for Regional Cooperation, stressed the importance of diplomatic relations between the Holy See and the State of Israel. Our relations are not based only on diplomatic and political ties, but on deep historical and spiritual ties. Monsignor Girelli, in his speech, also recalled that in 1994, following the signing of the Fundamental Agreement on December 30th, 1993, two diplomatic missions were opened, the Apostolic Nunciature in Jaffa, in Tel Aviv, and the Israeli Embassy in the Vatican. Since then, many common activities have deepened the relations, including the exchange of visits by the Supreme Pontiffs to Israel and by the Presidents of Israel to the Vatican.
L'accordo di 25 anni fa è un accordo di riconoscimento tra Santa Sede e Stato di Israele, che è stato importantissimo come
And it was positive because it marked the relationship between the Jewish and the Catholic worlds. It was the seal of a journey that began with Vatican II and with Nostra Aetate. Now it has come to a full religious but also state recognition. Not much has changed in the life of the Church, because after this general agreement there is also an agreement that defined the status of the Church within the State of Israel, but this has not yet been concluded.
Perché l'accordo prevedeva che dopo questo accordo generale ci fosse anche un accordo, una sorta di concordato che definisse lo status della Chiesa all'interno di Israele, ma questo non è ancora concluso.
Pray for Gaza, where everything is missing, is the plea of Monsignor Pizzaballa. Unemployment is over 65%. There are few hospitals, children are suffering, there is no electricity and water. Today, according to UN data, 1.6 million people live in Gaza. There are less than 800 Christians.
Ogni volta che si va a Gaza stringe sempre un po' il cuore. Sono 2 milioni di persone chiuse dentro che non possono uscire.
Every time you go to Gaza, it always breaks your heart a bit. There are 2 million people locked inside who basically can't get out. They lack the normal, predictable aspects of everyone's ordinary life. I'm talking about water and electricity. These are goods that we take for granted, but in Gaza they can't. They only have a few hours of electricity a day, little contaminated water with incredible consequences on the lives of the children, a very high unemployment rate with a challenging outlook. It is hard to think about how the situation can change.
Con difficili prospettive, è difficile pensare come la situazione possa cambiare.
The faithful of the Latin Patriarchate are distributed in 4 countries, and each country has its own stories and dynamics that are different from each other. It is something completely different to be a Christian in Jordan, Israel, Palestine, or Cyprus. The serious emergency situation of refugees in Jordan. There are 3 million refugees in Jordan out of 7 million inhabitants.
Una proporzione enorme. Il patriarcato
A huge proportion. The Patriarchate alone cannot cope with such a serious emergency situation. The Patriarchate does everything it can. We have identified a few emergencies. The first one is the school. One of the problems of the refugees, the children of these refugees, is that they haven't been in school for years. The first thing we have done is to make our facilities available. The Patriarchate has more than 20 schools in Jordan. Therefore, in the morning, schools welcome the Jordanians, in the afternoon, the Syrians, the Iraqis. There is the school for Syrians, for Iraqis with the support of Caritas and of many other institutions. But this does not solve all the problems.
Una cosa che non si conosce è che molti di questi rifugiati non possono lavorare.
And then the other aspect is to create opportunities for work. One thing that is unknown is that many of these refugees cannot work. So you have to create work opportunities that are as achievable as possible. so that they can live on what they do, which is a more dignified way to support them.
Che stanno lì per quanto possibile possono vivere di quello che fanno, che è un modo molto più dignitoso di sostenere.
10 years ago, the pilgrimage of Pope Benedict XVI to the Holy Land, the ordinaries of the Holy Land stressed that it will be difficult to forget Benedict XVI's authentic faith, his sentire cum ecclesia, feeling with the Church, his sense of duty and absolute fidelity and dedication, his example of intellectual honesty, simplicity and profound humility.
C'era molta preoccupazione per la visita di Papa Benedetto perché veniva dopo quella di Giovanni Paolo II.
There was much concern about Pope Benedict's visit because it came after that of John Paul II, who was incredibly successful. Pope John Paul II was the first to make all the gestures, the first to the Weeping Wall, the first to the mosques. It was a very important visit, especially for the Christian community. It was a very different context, evidently, because it happened after all the divisions, the problems. It was important because the focus was the support of the Christian community. The gestures were the same, but the context was completely different, and the speeches of Pope Benedict are still today a milestone for the life of the Christian community.
Sono ancora oggi una pietra miliare per la vita della comunità cristiana.
A recounted meeting admired over the centuries through documents, but above all an iconographic description of various periods. At the Pentecost chapter of 2017, the friars decided to go overseas. This chapter was a unique experience. There were many friars, and since they had no houses, they stayed in huts in the woods near the Porziuncola. The order was now a few thousand friars, and it was growing. In the chapter, the missionary expeditions were decided. In 1219, when he was 37 years old, Francis embarked in Ancona and reached Damietta in Egypt, where the Crusader army was deployed against the Muslim army. He manages to meet the Sultan. He can talk to him. And he also manages to get back safe and sound, indeed bringing with him gifts that showed a sense of Oriental hospitality and perhaps even a safe conduct to visit the holy places. According to Brother Francesco Patton, Custos of the Holy Land, it is not only Francis who dares, but also the Sultan takes the risk of listening to this little friar, armed only with the greeting of peace, and who has come to speak to him about Jesus Christ. He certainly managed to speak to the Sultan. This is attested by historical sources. We find proofs within our order in the ancient biographies of Thomas da Celano, Bonaventura and the others. And it is attested by the chronicles of the Crusaders, particularly in the Chronicle of Ernul, which for me is also the most beautiful story. It tells us how Francis goes to the Sultan and how he talks to him. It is also attested by Bishop Giacomo da Vitry, who was the Bishop of Acre, who was present at the Fifth Crusade. He speaks of this meeting both in his letters and in the Western Chronicles. Basically, what is evident is that Francis goes to the Sultan to announce the word of God.
Francesco va dal sultano per annunciare la parola di Dio.
In the writings of Saint Bonaventura we read that the Sultan conceived so much devotion to him that he considered him worthy of much honor. He offered him precious gifts and urged him to extend his stay with him. In Assisi, in the sacred convent of St. Francis, in the exhibition on the 18th centenary of the meeting between Francis and the Sultan, one can observe the ivory horn with the inscription, "With this bell, Blessed Francis gathered the people for preaching, and beating those two sticks together, imposed silence on them."
Quest'anno per me è stato un lungo pellegrinaggio.
This year has been a long pilgrimage for me because, on the occasion of the 8th centenary of the pilgrimage of St. Francis to the Holy Land, I received many invitations from many countries around the world. This meant travelling a lot to tell about this encounter. I must say that the thing that surprised me the most was to see the interest in this meeting. Not only interest from our Franciscan or Christian circles, but also interest in the Muslim circles.
Interesse da parte dei nostri ambienti francescani o cristiani, ma anche vedere l'interesse per questo incontro negli stessi ambienti musulmani. Penso al grande incontro che abbiamo.
I am thinking of the great meeting we experienced in Damietta, the place of the meeting between St. Francis and the Sultan, at the University of Al-Zahar in Cairo, where the involvement of the Muslim world was very, very strong. 800 years after Francis's pilgrimage of peace to the Holy Land, the Franciscans gathered with the Christian and Islamic authorities of Egypt to celebrate the meeting of the Saint of Assisi with the Sultan Malik al-Kamil. 8 centuries later, Francis, as the Pope observed, remains a prophecy for the whole of humanity. He who had gone unarmed in the time of the Crusades, only with the gospel in his hand. On Friday, March the 1st, the first pilgrimage occurred at the same places of the meeting in Damietta, north of Cairo, on the shores of the Mediterranean Sea, at the intersection with the Nile. Cardinal Leonardo Sandri, prefect of the Congregation for the Oriental Churches and emissary of the Pope, was greeted with great joy by the governor of Damietta, together with the Minister General of the Friars Minor, Brother Michel Perry, Brother Francesco Patton, Custos of the Holy Land, the Apostolic Nuncio in Egypt, Monsignor Bruno Musaro, Brother Kamal Labib, Provincial of the Franciscan Province of the Holy Family in Egypt, the Custodial Vicar, Brother Dobromir Yatsal, Imam Mohammed Abd Fattah, and delegations of the Friars Minor from all over Egypt. Today was a very beautiful event because these children staged the meeting of St. Francis with the Sultan. Therefore, I hope that by staging it, they have understood the value of that encounter and that they will become true peacemakers. On Saturday, March the 2nd, the University of Al-Azhar in Cairo, a key institution of Sunni Islam, opened its doors to welcome more than 600 guests. A conference on the theme, A Dialogue of Peace and Serenity, was organized together with the Franciscans of Egypt. The envoy of the great Imam Ahmad al-Tayyeb, the Grand Sheikh of Al-Azhar, together with various Islamic and Christian authorities, attended the meeting. In the speeches, there were themes related to the Islamic tradition, but also the contents of the declaration signed in Abu Dhabi, as well as thanks to the Franciscans for the wonderful mission of dialogue and peace in Egypt and in the rest of the world. I am very happy at this beautiful meeting that brought together brothers from all over the world and of all the religions. I hope that God will strengthen this true spirit of brotherhood, which aims to keep the world far from evil, aggression and terrorism, which distorted the image of Islam, the image of Christianity.
Noi frati minori in Egitto 110 frati con complemento con i studenti.
There are 110 friars in Egypt, 17 schools, 28 cloisters, 22 parishes between Copts and Latins, with different activities throughout the year.
Parrocchie copte, parrocchie latine, abbiamo tante attività durante l'anno, tanti convegni, facciamo almeno 10 convegni all'anno.
We have at least 10 conferences a year. We have clinics and orphanages. Many friars are young. We have a lot of space and a lot of work. Thank God we have room to serve not only the province, but the whole church.
Ringraziamo il Signore perché c'è lo spazio per servire non soltanto la provincia, anche servire per tutta la Chiesa.
It is a historical, prophetic fact of the new world that we hope will be, among all the religions, of peace, dialogue, understanding, never of violence, and even less of violence in the name of God, never of terrorism, never of the use of force. We ask for this new world through the intercession of the poor man of Assisi, who came without anything, only with his body, united to that of Jesus Christ.
Con il suo corpo unito al corpo di Gesù Cristo.
According to Brother Michael Perry, Minister General of the Friars Minor, the opportunity to relive the original Laudato Si and the Canticle of Creatures, and to rediscover that God is present in every person and that this is not a religious matter, is a matter of identity and of the fruit of humanity.
Allora il segno di Damietta è che io posso andare incontro ad ogni...
Therefore, Damietta's sign means that I can go and meet any other person knowing that I have a brother in front of me, not an enemy, and knowing that it is possible that the meeting takes place if there are mutual trust and acceptance.
Qui c'è un minimo di fiducia reciproca e di accoglienza reciproca.
From Damietta to all over the world, the Franciscan family of Brazil celebrated 800 years in Sao Paulo. Friendship and dialogue was the theme of the meeting. The friars of Sri Lanka, Pakistan and India met at the Chameleon Pastoral Center in Bangkok, Thailand, to reflect on the Franciscan missionary charism and how this charism can be effectively transmitted to the rest of the region. Slovenia, scientific conference on the 800 years since the meeting between St. Francis and the Sultan. Dialogue Committee meets in Istanbul. The Spirit of Dialogue in Vietnam. Commemorating Damietta in Germany and France. At the beginning of October in Tripoli, Lebanon, young Christians and Muslims gathered in the city's Franciscan convent to discuss the contents of the document on universal brotherhood. This was followed by a conference attended by scholars and representatives of both regions, including Tripoli's Mufti Malik al-Char, who spoke about brotherhood and possible ways to develop mutual relations between Christians and Muslims around the world. The day ended with a moment of celebration. In October, an entire week was dedicated to Jerusalem for the 800th anniversary of the meeting between St. Francis and the Sultan. A series of conferences sought, first of all, to analyze the event from historical sources. With the help of professors and scholars from different disciplines, they analyzed the Franciscan, Crusader, and Muslim sources. What's left of that historical event? Great attention was given to the legacy of the encounter between St. Francis and the Sultan, to how this can be made relevant. Then the concert of the Magnificat Institute. Among the desks of this music school, which brings together Christian, Muslim and Jewish children and students, the meeting comes to life every day. A walk of peace for once in the plain of the mosques, following the footsteps of St. Francis, who opened the door of Jerusalem to his friars 800 years ago. The entrance, normally intended for Muslims only, is opened for the delegations of the Custody of the Holy Land and the Vatican. The director of the foundation, who administers the esplanade on behalf of the King of Jordan, welcomed the delegations. The visit starts from one of the most sacred places of Islam, the rock on which Muhammad climbed to heaven overlooked by the Great Golden Dome, the place of worship and preaching in the esplanade for millions of Muslims, is the equally majestic Mosque Al-Aqsa. One of the imams greets the Christian delegation on behalf of the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. He describes the good coexistence between Christians and Muslims, remembers the times when he often visited his Coptic friends. The status quo violated in the Six-Day War is recalled by Sheikh Al-Khatib, who represents Jordanian authority. He says that Christians and Muslims want to keep together their respective holy places in the old city of Jerusalem. The esplanade is the most disputed because there stood the temple destroyed by Titus. The visit to Al-Aqsa is a sign of friendship towards Muslims and also an opportunity to reaffirm, stresses Cardinal Sandri, the full right of worship for the faithful of the three faiths in Jerusalem. To the Muslim professor who asks for accounts of the Crusades, the prefect of the Eastern Churches replies that history must be studied in the context in which it took place. Of course, no one would have thought of crusading today, In the year 2000, the Holy Father John Paul II asked for forgiveness for the crusade. The visit ends with a souvenir photo as a sign of a dialogue that it is not simple but increasingly necessary. This day allowed us to continue in the style of St. Francis, which is the style of seeking at all costs the meeting. And I think it is also the demonstration that when an encounter is desired, then the meeting takes place.
Ecco, io direi anzitutto che l'8° centenario non è chiuso, perché Francesco venne in Terra Santa.
First of all, the 8th centenary is not finished because Francis came to the Holy Land between 1219 and 1220. After coming to the Holy Land, he returned to Italy quickly in 1220. 1220 is the year of the martyrdom of the first 5 friars in Morocco. For me, the 8th centenary is not finished. It is still open, and above all, it must not end. But we must also continue with all those indications that Francis gave us after he finished his pilgrimage to the Holy Land and returned to Italy. I hope that the centenary will continue.
In Terra Santa ed è rientrato in Italia. Io spero che il centenario continui attraverso i suoi frutti.
From July the 7th to the 15th, the Friars Minor of the Custody of the Holy Land met at the convent of St. Saviour in Jerusalem for the Intermediate Chapter 2019. The main topics were the holy places and the region of St. Paul, Lebanon, Jordan and Syria.
Siamo una parte della custodia di Terra Santa.
We are a part of the custody of the Holy Land. The chapter has given it very strong attention because, as we all know, there are many problems. Not only the conflict in Syria, but also everything that it generates in nearby countries, Lebanon and Jordan.
Anche vicini in Libano e in Giordania.
The path that will lead in the coming years to the second phase of the restoration work inside the Basilica of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem has now entered into full swing. 2 Italian realities are currently involved in the long phase of the preliminary study. The Foundation Centro per la Conservazione e il Restauro dei Beni Culturali, La Venaria Reale in Turin, in collaboration with the Department of Science and Antiquity of the University La Sapienza in Rome. The aim is also to understand exactly what is under the stone floor. It is also an important ecumenical laboratory since everything is based on an agreement between the 3 Christian communities that are custodians of the Holy Sepulchre: Latin, Greek Orthodox and Armenian. It's Christmas in Bethlehem. It was a long day of celebration in the city, with hundreds of people along the streets waiting for the parade of scout groups and the arrival of the Apostolic Administrator of the Latin Patriarchate of Jerusalem, Bishop Pierbattista Pizzaballa. Then the preparation of the Grotto of the Nativity and the Midnight Mass, with the deposition of the statue of the child Jesus in the manger.
Senza una speranza grande non faremo mai nulla.
Without great hope, we will never do anything in life. Great hope must be born in our hearts. If we do not have it, we will always be waiting for someone else to come and save us. He will come. He has already come. But this strong desire in our hearts will push us to bring the salvation that we have experienced in real life.
La salvezza che noi abbiamo sperimentato.